confirm if you are able to hear me clearly and able to see my screen. Can someone please confirm me, sir, if you are able to hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Yeah. So far, what we discussed is in-memory authentication as well as in-memory authorization. That is what so far we discussed. Okay. The problems in that approach are mainly, first problem is it's not a dynamic authentication, not a dynamic authorization. Means whatever the user ID and password, whatever the role we set it, it will be at a compilation level. I mean, it's not at runtime. It's not at purely at runtime. Completely, whatever the authentication and whatever the authorization we have used, it's completely typically at a purely, that is typically at compilation level, not at runtime. So if you want to change at runtime, like if you want to create a new user or if you want to change the role of an existing user, we cannot do that. That's the first problem in the in-memory authentication, where we cannot achieve dynamic authentication as well as dynamic authorization. And we cannot create, for example, thousands of users, large volume of users, because all these users are sitting in the memory. We cannot spend high memory. We cannot spend high amount of memory only on the provisioning side. Like we cannot create lot of users, lot of roles and all those things. Typically, in-memory authentication is mainly useful for a small application with 10 screens or 20 screens, like 4 users or 5 users, 3 roles or 4 roles. A application which is going to have a minimal, I mean, it's not big application. At the same time, it's not a small application. It's not going to be big as well as it's not going to be small. Okay. Typically, it is going to have a minimum set of users and minimum set of roles. We cannot create large number of users and we cannot have a large number of roles. That is another disadvantage with respect to in-memory authentication as well as in-memory authorization. Okay. Now, the next point which I want to focus is, which is typically dynamic authentication as well as dynamic authorization. That is my next topic which I want to create, which is nothing but dynamic authentication as well as dynamic authorization. That is my next point which I want to focus. Okay. So before I proceed further on this, anyone has any questions so far? As of now? As of now, anyone has any questions, guys, so far? Okay. Now, what I am going to use case is nothing but the use case which I am going to is, I have a controller. Okay, whatever I'm going to use is I will write one controller. The controller is having 3 methods or 3 APIs or 3 endpoints, whatever it may be. I'm going to write a controller with 3 endpoints. How I want is, if I access first method, it should not ask me any username. It should not ask me any password. If I access the first method, okay, if I access the first method, it should not ask me any username as well as it should not ask me any password at all. And if I access second method, which is only admin role can access. Typically, only admin role can access the method. Second method, only admin role can access that particular method, and guest role cannot access that. Only admin role can able to access that particular method. There is a second method which is going to accessible. Okay. Now, third API, which is nothing but third API, only guest role can access. Only guest role can access and others cannot access. There is a next method which is going to access. Okay. So I have a controller with three methods. First method, only admin can access. Second method, only admin. First method, everyone can access. No security at all. No user ID, no password. Everyone can access the first method. Second method, only admin role can access. Third method, only guest role can access. Someone asked me 2 days back, like I have a controller, I want to access some method, I want to access something at some level. So this example is going to help that. Okay. So this is what I want to showcase this. One controller, three APIs. First method, everyone can access. No, it will not prompt login page also. You can access directly. Second method, only admin role can access. Third method, only guest role can access. Typically, there are three APIs in that where it is going to access. Okay, right. Now, we are going to create three users as well as three roles. We're going to have three users as well as three roles. One user, it's a global user. Second user, admin role. Third user, guest role. Something like that we can use. Okay. So where I'm going to explain further, before I go to implementation of the further things, I need to teach you the behind concepts. If at all, if I am storing my user ID, I'm storing my user details outside of Spring Boot. I'm storing my user details like user ID, password, and all those things outside of Spring Boot. Okay, which is going to have outside of Spring Boot. If I want to save the data, then how it is going to be happen? What exactly it will going to happen outside of Spring Boot? If I want to save the user ID, if I want to save the password, what exactly this situation I'm going to explain for us. Okay, first we are going to discuss, there are three concepts here. Okay, user detail service, enable global method level security, password encoder, as well as password decoder. Total three things. User detail service, enable global method security, password encoder, as well as password decoder. Total three APIs are available. Okay. So first one is in user detail service, we are going to have a predefined user object.
Hello.
Yeah.
So, sir, right now I'm using the Spring Boot version 2.7.6. So, in this, when we extend the web security adapter, so it is showing that it is not using now, means deprecated.
Yes,
So,
yes. I already told actually. I'm going to write a code and I'll share the code. Okay. So just like, even though it's deprecated, the current code will work. But
yeah, sir. Yeah, but now like Spring the 3.0.0 version also came. So in that they have removed the web security adapter. So like they are using the security filter chain.
Concept is same. Concept is same. Syntax is changes. I'm going to give a code which work with security 3.0.
Yeah. Please can you like give us that?
I already told that I'm going to give.
Sure.
Okay. Right. And moreover, one small request. Okay, please don't mind. Don't take it otherwise. When we are teaching something, right, don't distract the topic with to some other extent. Please, it's a humble request. Okay. So because I'm discussing a theory topic and somehow mind will go to the different and to everyone, not only to you. So whenever we discuss the same, if you're asking questions, if your questions should relate to that content, it will be well and good. Okay, please, it's my humble request. It's not okay, right? Now, first point is, if I want to save the data in the database, with username. If I want to save the data with password, user details object with username as well as password or anything. By default, as of now, we are going to use user details service. I need to use enable global method level security, password encoder as well as password decoder. Total 3 concepts I'm going to use. User details service, enable global method level security, password encoder as well as password decoder. These are the typical 3 concepts we are going to leverage. I mean, we are going to use these 3 concepts if I want to use dynamic authentication, dynamic authorization. Okay. When these 3 classes are useful, when our user details are outside of the Spring Boot. In the first example, default username is user, password is generated. That is typically Spring Boot only created that. And in the customized security, spring.security.user.name, spring.security.user.password. In these 2 scenarios, where username as well as password are part of this, okay, where it can be customized, I mean, where we can customize our username, customize our password. But still, user details are getting available in the Spring Boot boundary only. In the third case, we have used Authentication Manager Builder. In case of Authentication Manager Builder, our user ID as well as password is typically it is going to be used user ID as well as password is we are giving to Authentication Manager Builder. But still it is a Spring Boot context only. But we are going to, if at all, if our authentication data or our authentication object is I'm outside of Spring Boot because I'm going to create in the database my user details object, which is outside of the database. It's outside of the Spring Boot. If I want to keep the user ID as well as password and everything in the user details service, if I have a predefined user, predefined roles and user details object, how we are going to take it up? That is, we are going to discuss user details service. Okay. As part of the initial class, I mentioned, right? So what I have mentioned is in this particular example, in the tabular form I have given, I told, right, it is useful for our entire class, right? Authentication object as well as authorization object created by the framework. You remember, right? Authentication object as well as authorization object created by the framework, and just a developer need to populate the values. Authentication object as well as authorization object created by the framework, and just a developer need to populate the values. So here, authentication object is, it is user details service, which is a service class which is having a user details object. The object is user details object, which is going to be predefined user object, predefined role object, and user to role object. Predefined user object, predefined role object, user to role, which is a user details object. Okay. So our responsibility is to fill this object wherever it's populated. You take your own data in the database, no issues. Or you can take your own data in the LDAP, or you can take your own data in somewhere else outside of the Spring Boot. Your responsibility is to fill this particular object, user details object. User details is the predefined Spring Boot object where it has a predefined user, predefined role, as well as user details object, which is going to typically have. Okay. Our responsibility is to fill this object wherever it's auto populated. It's going to be populated automatically. Predefined user object, predefined role object, and predefined user details object, which is typically having that nature. Okay, which is a user details service object. So what I'm trying to say is, Is this user details object is created in this example only? No. Already user details object is already there. But in the three examples, in the first example, framework only assigns user details object dot username is equal to user details dot password is equal to generated password. There also it is used, but we don't know that it is used internally. Okay. User details dot username is equal to spring dot security dot user dot name. User details dot password is equal to spring dot security dot user dot password. In the third example, we are giving the data to authentication manager builder. We are giving the data to authentication manager builder. Okay? Our authentication data, user details object is, our responsibility is to fill this object wherever it's auto populated, which is going to have predefined user object, predefined role object, and user to role object. In these three cases also it is being used, but the data population internally taken care by the framework. This is predefined user, predefined role, and user details object. Our responsibility is to fill this particular object wherever it is auto populated. Next one is, second point is enable global method level security. Before I proceed further on the second point, is everyone is clear on the first point? User details service, is it clear to everyone? So what I'm trying to say is, if at all, if our data is outside of the Spring Boot, and if I want to create our own username and our own data, where we need to focus on our stuff. Okay. So next point is enable global method security. Before I proceed further, okay. By default, we have some predefined rule is there. While updating the role, okay, where you are going to have a user details object, which is internal object. While updating the role, you need to append role underscore is a keyword. You need to append role underscore plus role name. You are going to append role underscore plus role name. Role underscore plus role name we are going to assign. For example, assuming that our roles are admin role, guest role, manager role, as well as security role. Okay. Admin role, guest role, manager role, security role. By default, typically we is having 4 roles. While adding this particular data, okay, where you need to give the data like role underscore admin, role underscore guest, role underscore manager, role underscore security. By default, all these are the 4 types of things. Okay, role underscore admin, role underscore guest, role underscore manager, as well as role underscore security. Like this, we need to give. So in user details object, there is a simple granted authority property. To the simple granted authority property, we need to assign or we need to append role underscore plus role. Okay, let me repeat here, guys. As I mentioned, right, we have a predefined need to follow the guidelines mentioned by the framework in entire workflow. Need to follow the guidelines mentioned by the framework in entire workflow. Then only we can implement the security end-to-end. What is the guideline here? While appending the roles, while populating the data to the user details object, we need to update our role name saying that role underscore plus role name. It is going to have role underscore plus role name. So that is a typical thing we are going to have: role underscore plus role name, role underscore admin, role underscore guest, role underscore manager, as well as role underscore security. Totally, typically 4 roles are available, which is going to populate the data to this, okay? Which is nothing but user details object, which is going to have role underscore admin, role underscore guest, role underscore manager, as well as role underscore security. Okay. So this is a predefined condition, and remaining things you can populate as it is, but only while appending the role data, you need to append a prefix called as role underscore plus role name. Role underscore plus role name. That is what you need to append. Sir, everyone is clear? Any confusion in this point? On the first point? Can I repeat once again? If I want to repeat, I'll repeat also. But all of you clear on this? Any questions here as of now?
Repeat once again.
Yeah, you want me to repeat once again, right?
Yes.
Yeah, fine. So we are going to use a user detail service. What is user detail service is going to have? By default, as part of the guidelines which are mentioned by the framework, authentication data as well as authorization data is created by the framework only. Okay. So it is created by the framework only. Authentication object as well as authorization object is created by the framework. Just we need to populate the values. Okay. During that point here, okay, what is our intention is there is a predefined user object, predefined role object, which are nothing but user details is the object which is given by the framework. Okay. Our responsibility is to fill this particular data. It's a dynamic Java class. It's a dynamic Java class. So whatever user details dot username, whatever user details dot password, whatever user details dot simple granted authority dot role. Okay. Based on that, our security framework is going to work. So while populating the data to this object, where one normal prerequisite or internal guideline, what is that is, while appending the role name, you need to append a prefix called as role underscore plus role name. You need to add role underscore plus role name. Like user details object is having a property that is called as simple granted authority property. To that property, we are going to add role underscore plus role name, which is nothing but role. If at all, assuming that our roles are admin role, guest role, manager role, as well as security role, then our roles are role underscore admin, role underscore guest, role underscore manager, role underscore security. Like that we need to add. So by default, it is going to have authentication manager builder is going to have user details object, which is going to have roles as well as mappings. Role underscore plus role name, something like role underscore admin, role underscore guest, role underscore manager, as well as role underscore security. Like that it is going to have. Okay. How we need to populate the data? We have a user details object. Into that object, we have a property called as simple granted authority. There's a property called as simple granted authority property, where user details object dot simple granted authority property, which is going to typically have these values. Okay, that is the first point where we need to understand. Okay, any questions here, guys? Are you clear so far? Everyone on the first point? As of now, anyone has any questions, guys, so far? Okay. Guys, the participants who asked me, is it clear, sir? If you don't mind, you asked me second time. Everyone is clear, right? Please.
Yes.
Thank you. Next one is we are going to have enable global method security. What is the second point is nothing but in previous example, we added security at a URL level. For example, in the previous example, what is our security role? All tickets admin role, individual ticket guest role. Am I right? All tickets is admin role, individual ticket is a guest row. Is it correct? For that, what we changed here? We added keyword tickets slash ticket, tickets slash all. Somehow we changed URL. You remember, right? We changed the URL. By default, in a typical situation, sometimes I want to achieve authorization not at URL level. Like I am not going to write a regular expression. If URL is fitting here, doing like this, we already discussed. Just like at method level only, I want to add security instead of at URL level. Enable global method level security. That's the second interface which is given, which is mainly useful for adding the security at a method level, not at URL level. Enable global method level security is an interface mainly used to achieve at a instead of URL level, it is at method level. That's what you see here. Enable globally method level security. So, for example, all tickets. That method, I know that admin user only. I can write that admin user only can access like this. Individual ticket, both admin role as well as guest role. I can write on the method name. I no need to change the URL. So two types of authorization, URL level authorization as well as method level authorization. That is called as enable global method level security, mainly useful for achieving method level security here. Enable global method level security. This concept is mainly achieved for to be achieving like at a method level. So we are going to see, first of all, we are going to see the code. You don't need to worry about that. But I'm seeing previously HTTP security object is used where I can write a regular expression. If this URL is of this particular type, then this rule. If this URL is of this type, then this rule. Like that, we are going to have global method level security where we are going to enable. This concept is mainly used to achieve method level security and roles and user mappings, all those things at a method level instead of at URL level, where we are going to write enable global method level security. That's a second point where we are going to discuss. Okay. And the third point is we are going to have password encoder as well as password decoder. So second point is mainly we are going to discuss if you want to write authorization at method level, where we can take enable global method level security is the annotation, which is going to take care of achieving method level security. That is the enable global method security. And third one is where we are going to have password encoder as well as password decoder. Okay. So in the previous example, we mentioned that we cannot save the password in a plain text format. We cannot give the password in a plain text format to the security framework. If I give a plain password, framework is going to error out me. Framework is giving error to me, right? That's what we say that, right? So where what I'm trying to say is password encoder as well as password decoder are the typical points which is going to be useful to encode the password as well as to decode the password. Sir, I don't want to use noob keyword. Noob is the keyword which is managed by the Spring Boot only. Noob is the keyword which is typically managed by the Spring Boot only. Okay. But sir, I know my encoding method. I know my decoding method. Encoding method as well as decoding method. I know that. So I want to encode as well as decode on my own. I want to encode as well as decode on my crypto system. Sir, what do you mean by encoding? What do you mean by decoding? Is converting a string into unrecognized format. You cannot assume also. Okay. converting a particular text into unrecognized format, that is encoding. Okay, so sir, there are a lot of libraries are available, like base64 library, okay, SHA-256 library, RSA library, FIPS library. There are a lot of libraries are available. Okay, if I want to encode the username as well as if I want to encode the password based on our libraries, then I can use, by default we are going to use password encoder as well as password decoder. So you no need to have a code here. By default, password encoder as well as password decoder, typically it is going to have, okay, where we can leverage our code, where you are going to leverage our code with password encoder as well as password decoder, where we can encode as well as decode the password using your own crypto format. So, sir, I want to use base64 or whatever the format, can use password encoder as well as password decoder. Typically, it is going to encode as well as decode based on our own format. That's a typical, that is a password encoder as well as password decoder. You no need to write your own style. So password encoder dot, we are going to use that and we are going to take care of that. Okay. So totally user details object as well as our own user details service.
140 lakhs की 4 BHK.
Sorry. Someone is having a question actually. Okay. I don't know. Is there anyone having question, guys? Okay, fine. So everyone is clear on the 3 points where we are going to use these concepts.
For the
Go ahead.
first point, this user role and user details are like 3 different objects or just one object which is user.
It's a one object. User details is the one object which is having user ID, password, and role. So like
all 3.
All 3, but we have every class, we have a property, right?
Yeah.
So user is a one property, role is another property. So there is a property called a simple granted authority property for which we need to add role underscore plus role. Just like
Yes.
we'll going to see the implementation clearly. Before going to the implementation, just I'm explaining at high level what exactly the data structures we are going to use inside Spring Boot for achieving dynamic authentication as well as dynamic authorization. I'm going to discuss. That's what I explained. Okay. Yeah. As of now, any questions, guys, so far? Sir, as of now, anyone has any questions, guys? Please, no questions, right? Yeah. Now, I'm going to explain typically a workflow, how the things will work like here. I'm going to draw a little bit of flow diagram. DB authentication plus authorization flow, where I'm going to have 3 APIs, REST / hello / all. There are 3 APIs, sir. REST / hello / all. No security at all. Everyone can access this method. Everyone can use this method. It should not ask any security, any authentication, as well as any authorization. It's not going to ask any user ID, any password on this. Okay. Next one is REST / hello / secured / all. Maybe it's both for authentication as well as authorization. Only admin role can access. Only admin role can access this method. REST / hello / secured / alternative. both authentication as well as access authorization, only guest role can access. Second method, admin role. Third method, guest role. So in a controller, I'm going to write three methods. First method, anyone can access. Second method, only admin can access. Third method, only guest can access. That is how typically it is going to have. Okay. Now, how the flow is going to be? What exactly the flow? So we are going to write web security configure adapter, which having two methods as we see, right? Configure global as well as configure method. In configure global method, we are going to use user detail service, which is given by the springboot object. We are going to set user data, roles data, and user to role mapping. All those things we are going to use. Okay. And after that, all our roles are in the format of role underscore plus role name. Our roles are in the format of role underscore plus role name. That is to a simple granted authority. And we are going to write in configure method, we need to disable the CSRF and how I can exclude a method from the security. I need to exclude a method from security, right? Whenever I access this method, no security object. I need to skip the security for this particular endpoint. So how to do that? By default, we are going to achieve like any URL which is of containing secured keyword. Any URL which is containing a secured keyword. Here secured keyword is there. Here secured keyword is there. But here not there. So just like I'm going to take care of any keyword which is having secured keyword, that is going to be authenticated as well as authorized. So where we are going to take care of any keyword which is having typically user ID as well as password, anything which should have a secured keyword. Okay. Now, sir, I have 100 users. Maybe 50 roles I have. I have 100 users as well as I have 50 roles. Do I need to load all 100 users and do I need to load all the 50 roles? Something like that. How is the things? So you no need to load all user data. By default, important critical points. It's a very, very critical point which I'm going to discuss. Okay. So what is a critical point is nothing but by default. Sir, by default, whenever a login page is formed, assuming that I have user 1 to user 100 users I have. Okay. Something like user 1, user 2 up to user 100. We are going to have user 1, user 2 up to user 100. Okay. Now, I no need to keep all 100 users data into the memory. User details object, I am not going to populate all 100 users data. Which user data will populate? After login page is populated, after login page comes a pop-up or whatever it may be. Okay. Which user ID I am logging in? User 1, I type some password, right? I'll type user 1 as well as I'll type some password, right? When I click on submit button, okay, after entering user ID, after entering password, when I click on submit button, understand? At the time, on click of submit, framework wrote a code. Already framework wrote a code in all the examples. User detail service dot, it will call load user by username method. There is a predefined method is already available, which is user detail service class, which is having load user by username method. It's a very, very important interview question. It's a very important interview question, guys. Okay. User detail service class, load user by username method. So at what point this class will be useful? At which point this class will be useful is By default, whenever we write all our users, all our roles in the database side, okay, in the database side, whenever we write all our users, all our roles on the database side, we are not going to keep all 100 data to the database. So what is the framework is giving is, by default, we'll populate a login page or a login pop-up or anything. Whatever the username, whatever the password we give, and when we click on submit button, that time framework is going to call user detail service dot load user by username method. It is going to call user detail service dot load user by username method, which is going to populate. Okay. In the population side, user detail service dot load user by username on populating this. Okay. So whenever we click on that, we need to override this method. Load user by username, we need to override this method. What I need to override? I will go to my database in the method which I am overriding, and where I'm going to retrieve the data from the database. I'm going to override the data from the database, and we are going to retrieve the data from database, and we need to assign, we'll append the data, or we are going to update the data to the framework. Okay. So by default, what I'm trying to say is nothing but, okay, while appending the data to the database, which is user detail service dot load user by username, for that user data only, I'll go to the database, I'll get the data, and I'll update to the framework. What framework will do? Whatever the user details object dot username is same as the username. Whatever the user details password is same as the password, whatever we typed. Whatever the role which is expected is the same as user details dot role. Everything comparison will be done by the framework code. As I mentioned, right, in our previous things, user ID password verification done by the framework. Redirection to success URL done by the framework. Redirection to failure URL is also done by the framework. So at any point of time, even though we have lakhs of users, will not keep all lakhs of users or lakhs of passwords in the database. I mean, it's not going to load the memory. Okay. Whenever we click on submit button, framework will give you, framework only will call user detail service dot load user by username method. It is going to call, and there will override this method. We will load the data from database and will give the data to the framework, and rest of the things will be taken care by the framework. After that, in a controller layer, global method security like pre-authorization method is available, so that if this user is having that role, then that access will be given. If the user is not having the role, then you will get a forbidden error. A typical flow on this. So mainly important point is, this is an important point where we need to learn. User detail service dot load user by username. This will be called by the framework. Okay. Sir, by default, not only in this example, in every example, this is called, but we have not used. Okay. In the first example, user detail service dot load user by username, where framework only writes the code. Is username is user, password is matching with the generated one. In the second example, username is spring dot security dot user dot name, and password is spring dot security dot password. In the third example, authentication manager dot username, authentication manager dot password. It will going to compare, but because all the data is available at Spring Boot side, where we don't need to write a code. But here, my data is available in the database where Spring Boot is not aware on which schema, on which table I have the data. That's why you need to override the load user by username method. I'll populate the data with that username. I'll retrieve the data from database and assign to Spring Boot object. So that is a user detail service dot load user by username method. Sir, is it clear at a high level? Flow is clear? but I'll go in depth. Again, I'll go in depth in the next diagram. But as of now, is it clear flow diagram?
Yes, sir. Sir, one simple question. So
Please.
that in the box number 3, the DB logic which should fetch from a DB and settings this user role data to user details. So that will be done by us after authentication is successful by framework, right?
No.
Is that
Hmm.
okay?
Unless until you get the data, how it will authenticate?
No,
First of all,
user ID.
Mhm.
Go ahead, sir. You
No,
go
no.
ahead.
My only question is, assuming that I have a username Vijay, I have a password Vijay, and his admin role is and his role is admin role. Assuming that in my database, username is Vijay, password is Vijay, his role is admin role. That is what I saved in the database. Now,
Yes.
framework is calling me load user by username with Vijay role. What I need to do here? The DB logic in going to my role user table. Vijay is the username. Vijay is the password. Vijay is the role name. I'll update to user details object. User details dot username is equal to Vijay. User details dot password is equal to Vijay. User details dot simple granted authority dot role is equal to role underscore admin. Like that, I'll populate. Okay. How I can populate? The data is available in the database. I will write a code which will fetch the data from database and assigns to user details object. That is at the time of login page only it is going to happen. Okay. After login, at the time of login, what it will compare? Whatever the username is Vijay is typed on the username box is equal to Vijay. Whatever the password I typed on the password box, is it same as whatever the database password? Is having admin role, does it given by the admin role or not? Something like which is going to have, typically it is going to have user detail service is going to take care of that interval.
Okay. So that whenever the user click on the sign in button, so the DB logic which we perform and we populate the data
Correct.
to the user details,
Yes.
and which will be compared against the inputs given by the user.
Correct. Exactly. Correct.
That comparison will be done by framework, but
Framework.
population.
Comparison will be done by the framework. That's what I mentioned, right? Use maybe. Yeah. Okay.
No, I saw it, sir. Yeah.
No need, sir. Please don't, because it's a new for everyone. Not only to you, it's a new for everyone. Okay. That's why I am reiterating this table. I told, right, this table is very, very useful. Throughout the class, it will be useful. Okay. User ID password verification is done by the framework. Redirection of the URL login page will be done by the security jars. Redirecting to respective URL if success, or login page if failed. Everything is done by the framework only. Make sense?
Yep.
Sir, I have a question.
Please.
Yes, can one user have many roles or not?
Yeah, it can possible.
Yes, then how framework will his comparison will be done? It will be one by one. For every role.
For example, assuming that my user is having 4 roles: admin role, guest role, manager role, security role. Okay. So simple granted authority is having list of roles. It is going to have list of roles.
Okay, yeah.
So by default, if I authorization, for example, this method is for admin role as well as guest role. If my user is having both the roles, then this method will be called and executed. So framework knows that one user will have multiple roles. That's why simple granted authority is having a list object, not individual object. List of simple granted authority. We'll see that at the time of writing the code. Okay.
Got it.
Clear, right, everyone? Any other questions? As of now. Yeah, I think there is one more diagram is available. Maybe I take 10 minutes to explain this. Do you want me to continue today or you want to explain tomorrow? 10 to 15 minutes is required for this actually.
Explain today.
Tomorrow, sir.
Okay. Because you might be already loaded, already your brain is already loaded with that theory. Maybe it may not be tomorrow in the fresh, I mean, in the morning. I mean, tomorrow at the start of the class. Anyhow, I'll explain this once again, and I'll explain this code. I mean, this flow, how the flow will be, data flow diagram. Okay. Then we'll go into jump to the code. Fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other things before I stop for today? Okay, guys. Thanks everyone for today. Have a great day. We'll meet tomorrow. Thank you.